The scent of pine filled the air and the distant rustle of leaves as three couples, including my wife Sam and me, embarked on our long-awaited camping trip to Glacier National Park. Being surrounded by pristine wilderness had lured us deep into the heart of this remote forest. But little did we know that our escape from the daily grind would become a nightmare. Our campsite was nestled in a lush meadow, surrounded by towering pines and the gentle babble of a crystal-clear stream. The sky was filled with stars and the sound of the fire crackled in the fading twilight. Laughter filled the air as we settled into our cozy camp chairs. As the night wore on, the forest seemed to come alive with the chorus of crickets. Our laughter grew quieter, replaced by the gentle hum of conversation. It was then that we heard the unmistakable growl of a bear. Fear gripped us, and we huddled closer to the fire, scanning the darkness for any sign of the predator imp. Then, emerging from the shadows, we saw her, a massive black bear, her fur glistening in the firelight, and nestled beside her, a bear cub. The bear stood on her hind legs, towering over us, and let out a deafening roar. Panic swept through our group as we scrambled to our feet, abandoning our campfire and most of our belongings. We scattered in all directions. I sprinted through the underbrush, Sam's hand clutched tightly in mine. Behind us, the bear bellowed in fury, her cub trailing behind. We finally found refuge in the branches of a sturdy tree, our hearts pounding in our chests as we clung to each other. The bear circled below, her eyes glinting with malice, while her cub whimpered in confusion. Hours passed in that tree, the forest alive with the sounds of our pursuer. I could hear the anguished cries of our friends echoing through the night, followed by the chilling silence of their absence. The bear was relentless, determined to protect her cub at all costs. As dawn broke, the park rangers arrived, alerted by our frantic calls for help. They fired warning shots into the air, trying to scare the bear away, but she refused to relent. It was then that Bob, my best friend, made a fateful decision. With a heroic determination, he climbed down from the tree, his face pale but determined. He shouted at the bear, trying to draw her attention away from us. The bear hesitated for a moment, her gaze fixed on Bob, before charging toward him with a terrifying fury. The rangers fired tranquilizer darts, but they were too late. The bear's massive claws raked across Bob's arm, tearing it from his body with no effort at all. The blood sprayed like a sprinkler from his shoulder. The sight was too much, and I screamed in horror as the bear retreated, her cub in tow, leaving Bob screaming and writhing in agony on the ground. The rangers rushed to Bob's side, applying a tourniquet to his mangled arm. It was a race against time to save his life, and the forest that had once been a sanctuary had become a place of unimaginable terror. Bob survived his ordeal, but he paid a heavy price, forever marked by the savage attack. The bear and her cub were relocated deeper into the wilderness, far from any human settlements. The scars on Bob's body served as a grim reminder of the peril that had lurked just beyond the tranquility of nature. Our camping trip had become a horrific story of survival.
We were all gathered around the campfire, the flickering flames casting shadows on the trees. This was supposed to be a summer of fun, filled with camaraderie and adventure. Campfire stories, canoeing on the lake, and marshmallow roasts were the promises that had drawn us to this remote camp deep in the woods. But now, all we had were the whispers of something inexplicable lurking in the darkness. The first unsettling incident occurred on the second night. As we huddled in our sleeping bags in the rustic cabin, laughter and giggles filled the air. But then, a chill swept over the room. I pulled the covers tighter around me, trying to dismiss the unease creeping through the group. But soon, the whispers began. "They say a camper vanished from this cabin years ago," Denise, a girl from the bunk across, said, her voice trembling. "That's just a campfire story," Mark scoffed, attempting to quell the rising fear. The whispers grew louder, more persistent. Some said they heard footsteps. Others believed they saw a shadowy figure lurking in the corners of the cabin. It was impossible to pinpoint the source of these ominous happenings. As days passed, the atmosphere at Camp Penny Chai grew more oppressive. Campers vanished, one by one, leaving no trace of their departure. Panic set in, and the once playful children became skittish and paranoid. The counselors tried to maintain an air of calm, but even they couldn't ignore the mounting terror. The lake, which had been the center of our water activities, became the epicenter of dread. In the moonlit nights, the water surface would ripple without warning, as if some unseen entity swam beneath. Terrified whispers claimed it was the restless spirit of the missing campers. One night, unable to ignore the rising fear, Mark and I decided to investigate the source of the disturbances. Armed with flashlights, we ventured to the edge of the forest. The moon cast its pale glow on the towering trees, and the distant sound of a hooting owl seemed to mock our foolish bravery. As we made our way deeper into the woods, the air grew heavy, charged with an eerie energy. We felt watched, hunted even. The forest seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Our flashlights swept through the darkness, revealing nothing but the rustling leaves and gnarled branches. It was when we approached an ancient, gnarled tree that a piercing scream shattered the silence. It was Denise's voice, echoing through the night. We ran in the direction of her cry, panic surging through our veins. We arrived to find her trembling, wide-eyed, and alone, with no sign of the malevolent presence that had driven her to hysteria. We decided to leave the woods and seek help from the counselors, but before we could reach the camp, Mark stumbled, his flashlight rolling from his grasp. His voice became a shrill, frantic plea as he writhed on the ground, gripped by an unseen force. I grabbed his hand, trying to pull him away, but it was as if the very earth was pulling him into its depths. The forest seemed to close in around us, and the shadows whispered secrets that I couldn't comprehend. With a final, guttural scream, Mark was yanked from my grasp, leaving me alone in the oppressive darkness. I raced back to the camp, my heart pounding in my chest, and recounted the night's horrors to the counselors. They organized a search party, but Mark was never found. His disappearance sent shockwaves through the camp, and we were told to return to the cabin for the night. The lights were left on, but they provided little comfort. As I lay in my bunk, the whispers in the cabin grew louder. The air became cold, and a ghostly presence seemed to materialize. Shapes moved in the corners, and I was not alone in my fear. Every camper huddled in their sleeping bags, clutching flashlights like talismans against the unseen entity. The night was interminable, and when morning finally arrived, we were allowed to leave the cabin. The forest seemed darker than ever, the trees more sinister. I could still hear the whispers, and they seemed to follow me wherever I went. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had taken Mark was now watching, waiting for its next victim. As the days passed, more campers vanished, and the horror of Camp Penny Chi deepened. The camp was ultimately closed, and we were evacuated, but Mark and the others were never found. To this day, I'm haunted by the terror I experienced in the woods, the sinister entity that lurked in the shadows. I can't escape the whispers that seem to echo in my mind, a chilling reminder that some mysteries remain unsolved.